What's up guys, today we're going to be going over my top 30 One Piece characters starting 2026. And yeah, I know I'm a bit late to the party, well, a lot late to the party, but hey, better late than never, right? Now, I should specify this is going to include information up until the release of chapter 1171, so if Chopper one-shots Emu next chapter and I don't talk about it, that's why. Also quickly I want to shout out this comment. I wasn't going to do a top 30 since I'm so late, but they mentioned it so I thought, hey, why not? And I appreciate you for commenting. Okay, now before we get into the rankings, let's set a few ground rules for how the list is going to work. First of all, this is going to only be ranking currently alive people in their current state. If you guys want to see me do a top 30 all time, be sure to let me know. If enough people want to see it, I'll do that as well. But this one's only going to be people currently running around in the world. Now as for who's eligible to be ranked, I'm going to be excluding people who just have too little information to be ranked. For example, Ben Beckman. We literally have zero information for him to go off of, so me putting him anywhere would essentially just have no basis, so I'm excluding him. Same goes for Dragon by the way, since he's done nothing but grab 3x6 Smoker and look east. Mihawk will be ranked though, since he has enough statements for me to at least make an accurate estimate as to where he would rank. Lastly, I'll be representing this in almost a tier list-esque format. For example, if I list numbers 30 to 28 for example, like if I list them together, it's because I believe they're all close and can all beat each other under the right circumstances, like they're all around the same level of power. My rankings just reflect who I believe has the slightest edge between them. Okay, now that we have all the admin out of the way, let's get into the list. Kicking off the list we have Karakuri. Now this may seem controversial, but although Cat seemed strong when we met him, he's been power cliffed hopelessly since then. He went extreme diff with Gear 4 Luffy on Whole Cake Island, and regardless of who you think was slightly stronger, they were relative. And then Luffy got an island buff and in Gear 4 gets one shot by Kaido. This Luffy then trains in Udon and is capable of taking hits from Kaido in base, but is still being overpowered by Ulti and being willing to use Gear 4 on her. See how bad the power cliffing's getting you? I just give Karakuri the benefit of the doubt over the Tobiropo because their respective interactions with Luffy had different contexts. Luffy wanted to beat Karakuri to prove his strength. He wanted to beat Ulti in page 1 in a rush to get to Kaido. But the fact that it's even a debate should show why he's only the gateway to the top 30. At 29 I've got Gunko, but this is simply because of her battle IQ. She was capable of dispatching 4 of the Straw Hats mostly off screen and even putting Gaban down. Now to be clear, her beating Gaban wasn't entirely a strength feat, but like I said, a feat of just how smart she is. Gunko is not gonna play fair in a fight, she never has so far, and in character I don't think she ever will, and will find a way to make up for her lack of power with her intellect. Now if you wanna put Cat over her because you think just power level wise she's stronger, I think that's fine. I just think it's noteworthy to acknowledge that she is a battle IQ monster. At 28 I'm putting all of the Seraphim. I just think they're all relative, and honestly I didn't want to take up 7 list spots with them because I feel like that would be just a waste. Now the Seraphim are a problem for anyone in the top 30 who doesn't know their weakness due to their hyper regeneration and endurance when their flames are on. The problem is that when it comes to their offensive options, they're just not that impressive. The only reason they're so dangerous is because almost no one knows how they work. We've seen against opponents like Awakened Sanji, they can't even make him flinch, and against Blackbeard, S-Hawk gets off-screen, which yeah, shocking I know, Blackbeard off-screening someone, breaking news, Sky's blue R sentence, but the Seraphim wasn't even able to damage Blackbeard during the off-screen clash since he's literally completely fine when we see him again. And the same goes to the 2v4 with S-Hawk, S-Bear, fighting Luffy, Zoro, Lucci, and Kaku. The Seraphim do zero meaningful damage, and the only notable thing about them is that they keep getting up. Like only 2 people get hurt by the Seraphim, and these are Robin and Kaku, and it took 2 of them to put down Kaku, and we don't know in what context they hurt Robin. So the fact that they've been shown over and over again to not be able to hurt people at or above a certain level, and based on Zoro vs King, even idiots can figure out how their bodies work if they last long enough, I just cannot put the Seraphim any higher. At 27 I have Jimbe. Now I know this one is mad controversial, especially considering this man literally lost to Gunko already and I placed Karakuri below him. But I'm considering Jimbe holistically here, so I'm including a hypothetical water Jimbe. Now the reason I have him here is because first of all, like I said, Gunko doesn't play fair. Her powers at Jimbe attacking his friends, so it stands to reason he will be fighting a lot more cautiously, and we don't even see him use Haki. Not to mention after this the Straw Hats she beats aren't even heavily injured, and Nami even calls Jimbe out for his poor performance. So I think similar to Gaban, he just lost due to circumstance. As for Karakuri, Karakuri's Devil Fruit is confirmed to have a weakness to moisture which Jimbe knows about, and that's literally Jimbe's entire fighting style, so he can mitigate Karakuri's fruit if they were to fight. And due to Fishman Karate's Duraneg properties, his hits are also gonna hurt. And I'm not sure if you guys know this, but Karakuri is not really good when it comes to taking damage. Like, there's a chart out there somewhere that explains how little hits he took from Luffy during their fight. And also Karakuri was bleeding buckets from a base Luffy kicking him as well as punches from other. So yeah, if Jimbe was to hit him, it would definitely hurt. Now when it comes down to the Seraphim, it's definitely an extreme diff fight and it's hyper contingent on if Jimbe either knows or can figure out their gimmick. But Jimbe is an endurance monster, so we know he can last long. But the Seraphim are definitely in his weight class and are tricky opponents, so it's definitely a close fight. I just think if we can figure them out, he wins more times than not, and that's why I have him above everyone that's been listed so far. At 26 I have Rob Lucci. I don't think it's controversial to say he's the favorite against Jimbe, and given that stands to reason he upscales from all the reasons I placed Jimbe where he is. He was also able to last a while against the Seraphim while not even using his awakening, which is why I have him over the Seraphim. Now the reason he's not higher is because he got embarrassed on Egghead. He stood zero chance against Luffy and literally couldn't even comprehend why Luffy's punches were so strong, so that immediately tells us he's not even in the same conversation to be in that tier of strength. And then Zoro embarrasses him again by ending him in a singular ACOG attack. Now, I'm of the opinion that base Zoro and Sanji are both in this tier, but once they use their power-ups, that being King of Hell and the Jimbe genes respectively, they shoot up an entire tier, and we've been shown on panel Lucci can't even handle a single serious attack from people on their level when they're at full power. Now to quickly address something, near the start of the fight Zoro is seemingly using King of Hell, but this is the only time he does it before the very end. I believe Zoro just turned it off, especially since we literally see Zoro go down to 2 sword style at some point in the fight, so he clearly wasn't going all out. Considering using King of Hell literally kills Zoro and he can't use it for long, and it's mentioned several times how long he was fighting Lucci for, I think outside of the initial class Zoro just didn't use it because he stopped deeming it necessary. The reason I think this is because he literally disses Lucci's strength when they start fighting and even tells Lucci that he's in control of how long they fight. It's not in character for Zoro to say these things for no reason, so I think Zoro genuinely was holding King of Hell back due to the danger posed to him and the fact that Lucci's only on par with base Zoro. Sorry, I know that was a long rant, but I feel I had to explain why Lucci's in this tier and not above. At 25 I've got Koby. Now I know this is going to be controversial, but I'm taking Koby at his peak, and if he's capable of dishing out honesty impacts the way Garp dishes out those galaxy attacks, he's genuinely doing serious damage to practically anyone on the list. Now you may be wondering why I'm giving honesty impact so much stock, and it's honestly because it's quite underrated. For some reason people never bring up that honesty impact did more damage to Pizarro than any of Garp's attacks. Galaxy impact, although it looked and definitely sounded cooler, barely did anything. Galaxy Divide hurt Pizarro, but he retaliated almost instantly. Honesty Impact had Pizarro screaming and had people running to check on him because of how much it hurt. This attack is extremely underrated and is a reason Garp risked everything for Koby. The only reason I'm not putting him higher is because other than this, he kinda has nothing simply due to lack of showings. But make no mistake, the Pink Mamba packs a punch. At 24 I have Queen, at 23 I have King. Now while I do think King is clearly stronger, I figured it's best to talk about them both at the same time since they both share a lot of the same talking points. They were both capable of boxing with Zoro and Sanji respectively and overwhelming them in base. Queen is capable of crippling Sanji, and although there was context behind it, it shows that if he can land attacks on base Sanji he can do serious damage. King was shown to be capable of completely controlling his fight with Zoro in every facet until Zoro unlocked King of Hell, and as I've said earlier, I believe the base iterations of those two are in this tier, which is why I think that these two commanders who were capable of fighting them and overwhelming them are here. King's performance against Zoro in contrast to Lucci is why he gets completely put above him, and Queen's versatility is what puts him above Lucci. Now these two are the very top of this tier of strength. I don't think they make it into the next because they fought a few people in there, and to be honest they didn't do the best, but I'll get there when I get there. Here's the list of everyone in this tier in order. Like I said, because I have them under the same tier, I do believe that anyone in this tier could beat anyone else in it under the right circumstances. I will say I think it becomes far less likely the further separate they are the way I rank them though. Kicking off this tier at number 22 we have Marco. I have him definitively above everyone else in the previous tier because you've literally seen him take on the strongest in that tier, King and Queen, and he was putting the paws, or I guess talons, on both of them at the same time. And this is after he flew to Wano all the way from Sphinx Island and clashed with Big Mom, and while he's using his powers to stop the ice-only disease from spreading, and also trying to minimize casualties. Marco came in half-cocked, had a clash with an Emperor, and even had to retreat because she deemed him too much of a hassle. and then went on to fight the two strongest people under Kaido while protecting others and was knocking them all over the performance floor. So I think it's clear he's blatantly above them individually and could probably even beat them together if all those other factors didn't come into play. The only reason I don't have him higher is because others in this tier have just been more impressive. At 21, I've useless Captain Mid. Yes, I'm assuming he's alive. Mid's durability and endurance is insane though. He was capable of taking constant attacks from Kaido and Big Mom and keep going, and even eat one of Big Mom's punches with a smile and blast her off the island. During his bout against her with Law, he was also the one we see get pelted with most of her stronger attacks, which shows that he doesn't go down easy. His damn punk is also capable of doing serious damage to Big Mom. The only reason I'm not putting him higher is because A, he's a bum, and B, his strongest attack just didn't do much. Yeah, it hurts Big Mom a lot, but it doesn't even KO her. It just pushes her into the lava essentially, which is what finishes the fight for them. And all the other times he attacks her, she either brushes it off or mainly credits Law during their combo attacks. He is an Endurance monster and hits hard. I just think those higher than him in this tier have more in their arsenal or have better direct comparisons to top tiers. Like this man needed an awakening to pull out a pre-time skip Alabaster ace level feat. Like, come on now, what are we doing? At 19 and 20 I have Zoro and Sanji. They're basically tied for a spot, but since it's two characters, I decided to just, let them take the two slots. I think in this situation, it's a lot more fair than with the Seraphim, as like, for example. But they're blatantly stated to be equal, and narratively, I think this holds up, so they are both tied. Now, as to why I have them here, they both are shown capable of dispatching the strongest of the previous tier quite quickly once they go all out. Zoro ends King in 3 attacks, and the second Sanji uses Ifrit Jimbe, Queen is done in a page. Sanji is shown capable of intercepting attacks from Kizaru, something Gear 5 Luffy was struggling to do, and what he lacks in raw strength he makes up for with his kicks that burn his opponent's insides and his regeneration. Zoro is a powerhouse capable of scoring Kaido. Only reason they aren't higher is because we just haven't seen enough of them against top tiers going all out. Zoro had a great performance on the rooftop, but everything great he did was when Kaido was screwing around, including scarring him. The only exception is when he blocked the combined attack from the two Yonko because they were going for the kill there, which is a testament to Zoro's durability and endurance, especially because he kept fighting for a bit after. Now the reason I bring this up is because the two above them just have better showings against Emperors. Now I will acknowledge Zoro and Sanji have gotten stronger since Wano, but we can't definitively say by how much. On Egghead, the only people they fought full on were weaker than them, those being the Seraphim and Lucci. Then Sanji has to run a rescue op and does intercept Kizaru but doesn't fight him. And Zoro and Sanji both only have brief clashes with the Albers. Neither have full on bouts because their aim at this point was escape, not a fight. And as of Elbaf, all they've fought is fodder, so until further notice this is where they cap out. At 18th we have Law. Law is hacked out the wazoo. We've seen him face off against 3 Emperors and be a problem against all 3. And against Big Mom he blatantly outperformed Kid in every facet. He's shown capable of damaging Blackbeard and taking attacks from his Gura Gura no Mi and even clashing evenly with that fruit when using his awakening, and only seemingly being pushed back when Blackbeard uses Kurozu to turn off his powers. And we know Blackbeard was both injured and fatigued after his fight with Law, which shows Law was capable of putting up a decent fight. I think this is enough to put him above everyone else before him in this tier. At 17 I have Yamato. Simply put, I think Yamato is simply above Law since we see Law literally get blitzed by Kaido after Kaido tells him he's coming for him, and Yamato is capable of not getting blitzed by Kaido's Thunder Bargo and even gaining the minor advantage in their Thunder Bargo clash, as Kaido was the only one bleeding after it because Yamato outplayed him. Kaido also admitted to taking this fight with Yamato seriously, which is more than we can say for how he was treating 1 HP Zoro and Law, so I think it's quite clear that Yamato's over Law. Here's a list of everyone in this tier. Green Bull is at 16. We've blatantly seen Green Bull beat 3 people on the list so far, these being King, Queen, and Yamato, all of which were not 1v1s, but instead Green Bull going in with the numbers disadvantage and having superior showings. Now I will grant that all of them were still blatantly shown to be injured, so they confirmed to not be at 100% when fighting him. Despite this though, I still think that the fact that he's capable of handling not only Yamato, but also simultaneously 5 Jack level threats in the Scabbards is saying something, even if they're all injured. Yes, I did just call the Scabbards Jack level. I believe all the Scabbards are relative, and Jack's V record was glazing him for being able to clash against tough samurais using Ashura Doji as the example, so I think all the Scabbards are at least around Jack in power, with Nekomamushi and Inuarashi and Sulong as well as Denjiro being the clear strongest of the bunch. All this to say, Green Bull is shown to be blatantly above anyone who's considered Commander tier, even considering the fatigue these fighters had since, they were jumping him. and with Momo's help too, is capable of hurting Kaido with just the raw force of his bites, which is unironically a better strength feat than anything Kid did on the roof. So yeah, Green Bull deserves to be here. At 15 I got Fujitora. I think Fujitora and Green Bull are relative. I just got Big Fuji over Fraud Bull because he's objectively the better Admiral, and also he's got good guy tags in my book, so I think if they ever fight later in the story, he's putting Green Bull down. At 14 I'm placing all 5 of the Gorsay. This is just a safe space, and I do think that they're all relative for the most part anyway. The only two who might be a bit stronger than the rest are Gandhi and the Monopoly Man, but that's just speculation based on aura. Now the reason they aren't any higher than this is because they are hard carried by that immortality, and everyone above them either has a way to counter it or narratively is as strong or stronger than someone who does, so the Gorsay cap out. Also, to be clear, the criteria to be above the Gorsay wasn't just can you counter the immortality, it's just that the strongest in the verse are the ones who have the ability to do that, as Kaido even says. If you do think there's anyone in this tier that's above the Gorsay individually power level wise but was ranked below them, I think that's fine. It's just that the Gorsay's immortality is part of their core gimmick, so it's hard for me to not take it into account when ranking them. Now capping off this tier, sharing the top spot, it's the wings of the original Pirate King, Dark King Silver's Rayleigh, and Mountain Eater Gaban. Now the only reason they are in this tier, not the next one, is just because they are old, and I think everyone in the next tier would beat them just due to their age and the fact that they've both been inactive, only fighting when absolutely necessary for decades at this point. Despite that, both still have insanely impressive showings, such as Rayleigh being able to hold off an admiral and scare off an emperor, and Gaban being able to output the most advanced form of Conqueror's Haki we've seen without collapsing with exhaustion at his old age or exhausting his Haki reserves, and even going on to use Future Sight. And we know that Haki can run out, and using what the fandom calls the advanced forms of Haki seems to take a lot of Haki, since Luffy explicitly wants to give Katakuri time to rest and recover his Haki after one round of their fight, and this is why using these high levels of Haki, when, let's be honest, Gaban most definitely wasn't keeping up with his training, is impressive. There's also the teeny tiny minuscule fact that Gaban was capable of pushing Luffy into Gear 5 and was even deemed such a threat that Zoro stepped in and Luffy didn't tell him to step aside, which is in character for Luffy to do. Gaban is genuinely a monster, and I have really equal to him just because I think narratively it makes the most sense. Now, based on the Gear 5 Luffy and Zoro interaction, if you want to move these two to the bottom of the next tier, I wouldn't be mad at all. I just wouldn't because I think their age has caught up to them. This is a list of everyone in this tier. Kicking off the top tier, we have Loki at 11. Now, I don't think it's ridiculous to have Loki over Gaban and subsequently Rayleigh, right? A younger, but notably still old and retired, Gaban, with the help of a younger Shanks, couldn't put down Hero, and Loki did it in one shot, so clearly he's definitively above Gaban, especially when in my opinion, Gaban has only gotten weaker since then, since age is consistently portrayed as a nerf in One Piece. Now the reason he's not higher will be explained when I get to the people above him. So at 10 and 9, I have Luffy and Kizaru. Now these two quite frankly are extremely close, and I'm speaking about them together for this reason, as I believe they are extremely relative. And my reasoning for one being somewhere would reflect on the other considering how they fight went. Now in my opinion, I have Luffy above Kizaru. I just think it's extremely close like I said. I would not be mad if you have the opposite opinion though. Now the reason Luffy is over Loki is because I just think narratively that makes the most sense. Oda wouldn't have Luffy pick out someone stronger than him to be a subordinate, and since Luffy is over Loki, Kizaru should be too due to how close in proximity to Luffy he is. Now Luffy along with Zoro and Sanji will most likely get a power up in Elbaf and move higher, but for now I have Kizaru at 10 and Luffy at 9. At 8 and 7 I have Garp and Sengoku. Now I'm gonna be blatantly honest and admit Sengoku's only here because of Garp tags. He's meant to be the Whitebeard to Garp's Roger, so he gets upscale from what Garp does, but he's definitely weak in my eyes, so he's 8 and Garp is 7. Now onto the controversial stuff, me having them over Kizaru and Luffy. Firstly, I think I should address why I think they are so much stronger than old Rayleigh and old Gaban, and that's simply because Garp and Sengoku didn't retire, or at least not until recently in Sengoku's case. And Gaban and Rayleigh have been inactive for literal decades, meanwhile Garp and Sengoku were two of the main forces of the Marines during that time, so I think it's safe to say that these two lost less of their strength than the Wings did. Now as for them being over Luffy and Kizaru, Garp is capable of taking on Kuzan, who had help from the other Blackbeard pirates, and Kuzan and Akainu are portrayed as above Kizaru in my opinion, since when it came down to who's going to be the fleet admiral, it was down to those two immediately. Kizaru wasn't even brought up. Now if you want to argue just because Kizaru is lazy, narratively Oda is still putting these two above Kizaru since not only are they both in positions to be endgame threats with Kuzan being directly under Blackbeard and Akainu being the fleet admiral, but on the infamous it all comes down to who claims the One Piece panel, both Kuzan and Akainu are there and Kizaru isn't. So it's clear to me that he's below them, and Garp has fought one of them and even threatened to kill the other. Now there is the fact that Kuzan can be considered to be mentally nerfed for part of the fight, But I think that kind of gets nullified by the fact that he had help, and Garp was also focusing on protecting his students, so Garp also had handicaps in this fight. Considering it was Garp and a few good men versus an entire island, and before he gets stabbed protecting Koby, he seems to be having the upper hand too on everyone, I'm feeling pretty confident putting Garp this high. And make no mistake, the stab was a significant move, since Kuzan even makes note of it when he sees Garp is moving around. All of this is just to prove that Garp deserves his spot this high, and Sengoku the Corrupt just gets here by association. At 6 it's Kuzan. I've just gone over why I believe he's over Kizaru and therefore over current Luffy, and I think it's clear he's over old Garp. Now, while I did mention in Garp's section that I think Kuzan's mental nerf was compensated for by the fact that Garp was getting jumped, that was ignoring the fact that Kuzan was also not fighting in a lethal way. If Kuzan took that fight seriously, he would have been the one to stab Garp with his ice sword, and just in general would have taken a far more lethal approach to the fight instead of embracing the more brawler style that we saw. So while I do believe Garp is still relative to him and can give him a good 1v1 brawl, Kuzan has enough tools to put Garp down, so I think that puts Kuzan over him. Off-screen man is number 5. Look, the only reason he's here is because he's Kuzan's captain, and I don't think Oda would have a captain be weaker than their subordinate. Buggy's an exception because he's Buggy. So yeah, off the screen is only here because of Kuzan tags, and now I'm moving on because I'm sick of talking about him. Akainu is clearly being set up to be an in-game antagonist, and we know he's over Kuzan since he literally won that fight, so he's here. I don't really have much else to say about him until he leaves that desk of his though, so that's the end of his section. At number 3 it's Mihawk, and at number 2 it's Shanks. Oh boy, I can already tell this is going to be a fun conversation in the comments. Yes, I've got Shanks over Mihawk. Now before I get into the gist of that, I feel I should just explain why these two are here, since honestly I feel that conversation is quicker. Simply put, Shanks just blatantly outscales Big Mom based on the fact that he can one-shot Kid and Big Mom had to sacrifice lifespan and still couldn't do that. And in fact she couldn't even KO Kid after a fight lasting several chapters. This already puts him in the realm of Kaido no matter how you think Big Mom scales to Kaido. And Kaido is constantly called the strongest creature in the world, not only in his introduction but also in external sources, and even in the Ace novel, Kaido is hyped the most between the 4 emperors at the time, those being Kaido, Shanks, Big Mom, and Oldbeard. Then also narratively, Shanks is one of Luffy's goals, and Luffy wanted to beat every other emperor and then take on Shanks. Now you can argue about Luffy's knowledge and all that, I just believe narratively this is Oda putting Shanks above the rest, since Luffy would narratively only get stronger from fighting the other 3 emperors, and only then would Luffy be deemed worthy of an audience with Shanks. Now onto the controversial stuff. Why do I have Shanks over Mihawk? Well, firstly, I don't put a lot of stock into titles in One Piece in general. One of the main themes of the series is propaganda, and a recurring plot point is how Morgans will glaze into mean characters as much as he pleases so long as it sells papers. But I know that's not enough, especially because of what's said in some supplementary material, which I will now address. Now in Mihawk's V-Ray card, it states that he is the strongest in both name and reality. Now I'm going to ignore all arguments that the V-Ray cards aren't reliable just for now, although I can acknowledge they exist and I know why they exist. But assuming the V-Ray cards are reliable unless contradicted by other sources or the manga itself, let's see if this statement holds up. So immediately we have a statement stating that Shanks was once as powerful as Mihawk in the past, from One Piece Red Grand Characters, which is the first One Piece data book. And immediately this causes an issue, because in Mihawk's V-Ray card it also states he challenged stronger and stronger foes until he had no worthy challenges, which implies none of them were strong enough to challenge him, which the Shanks statement contradicts. Then there's also Mihawk's entry saying he wants to find someone who surpasses his rival, which doesn't make sense since Shanks is stronger now than he was when he fought Mihawk. The only reason Mihawk refuses to fight Shanks is because Shanks is one arm now, and it'd be dishonorable. But Shanks has just blatantly gotten stronger since he had 2 arms. When he had 2, he was inferior to Loki, and with 1, he was the only person capable of stopping him. So the person Mihawk is looking for allegedly already exists, since he'd only be speaking in reference to the Shanks of 12 years ago. And yet Mihawk always ducks the fade. Like I said, it's simply because Mihawk is a true swordsman who values honor, and Shanks just kinda doesn't care. Shanks is considered the freest on the seas, at least pre-Gear 5 Luffy, so why would he tie himself down to the moral code of a swordsman? In chapter 1 of the manga, we see how he doesn't care for the rules of others and what they consider playing fair because he's a pirate, a mentality Luffy would inherit. Now whether you still want to consider Shanks a swordsman, sure, whatever, don't really care. My point is just that he's not bound by the code swordsmen seem to follow, and Zoro does follow. Shanks does what he wants, which is why he doesn't care about fighting Mihawk, but Mihawk refuses to fight him, and we've seen Shanks only get stronger with time, whereas they have nothing to prove the same with Mihawk. I bring up Mihawk's honor because people like to argue Mihawk doesn't fight Shanks because Shanks is weaker or anything to do with strength, and that just simply isn't the case. This leaves us with the following information. Shanks and Mihawk were equal 12 years ago, Shanks loses an arm, goes on to get stronger, but Mihawk refuses to duel him again, so their fight never gets settled. And since we know Shanks got stronger, and again, has zero proof to say the same for Mihawk, this is why I have Shanks over him. Okay, that was a long section to assert one thing, but I'm sure you understand why considering who I was talking about. With that done, here are all the people in this tier. And the number one is Emo. Like, come on, it's very clearly Emo. I don't think I even have to explain why. Whatever that thing is, it's clearly the strongest thing in the series right now. And with that, we have my top 30 complete. This is going to be my longest video to date, and if you watched all the way to the end, I really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed, be sure to leave a like. If you agree with my list, or think there's anything you would have changed, be sure to let me know in the comments. And with that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of your day, or night, whenever you're watching this, and I hope to see you all next time.